Hello, friends. This is a sleepy-eyed Waylon Lewis from Boulder, Colorado, coming to you live on Saturday morning, and I have a big treat for us this morning. If everyone who tunes in will just say where in the world you're from, and maybe how you're doing, how you're really doing. Maybe say how you're really doing and where in the world you're from. I have a big treat this morning. I'm going to be joined by dear elephant friend who has been a really needed and welcome and leading voice throughout this pandemic, as well as throughout the BLM movement and the anti-racism education that he has been offering generously has been incredibly helpful to me, and I think many of us. So it's overdue to have him on, and I can't wait. And that's what you get Saturday morning from Elephant and Watkins. So please say where in the world you're from. Please ask questions. Let's make this as interactive and as educational as possible.
What's up, Ed?
Light.
How you doing? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's a little buzzy, but yeah, it sounds okay.
I can take these off. Hold on a second. Let me see.
I think it sounds good either way.
How's that? Is that better?
It's about the same. It's a little like electronic, but it's understandable.
I can plug in from another device too. That helps.
Yeah.
Let me do that. I'm gonna go on cell and I'll plug in.
Okay, good.
Sec.
You bet. So while Light figures out the audio, it wasn't too bad, I don't think. Let's say hello to everyone. Miami, we got Cotswolds, and remember to say how you really are doing. Sagehorn, you don't have to get crazy about it. Just say how you're actually doing. Doing good in the UK, Chicago, Woodstock, New York, working through stuff, and good. Juliet, great to hear from you. South Wales, I'm a little bit Welsh. Elephant from Lonely Bright Star. Hello, Virginia, Minnesota. We got the whole world tuning in. Chapel Hill, Dubai, Tampa. Anyone else? All right. It's a good group. Hanging in there in Miami. Sounds like a follow-up to Sleepless in Seattle. Doing great in North Carolina. Iran, hello, welcome. Feeling overwhelmed? Good to hear. Yeah, so bring any energy you got. Went surfing yesterday. That sounds pretty good. TWM photo, painting seascapes in the middle of a thunderstorm. Rachel Gregory, fabulous in Houston. These all sound like sequels. Botswana, it's cold but good. Hello, welcome. Got North Carolina, Oregon, Colombia. My favorite vegan pastries in Boulder are made by a lovely Colombian lady, Francesca. All right, Texas, and let me see if Light is, oh, he's here. All right. Atlanta, Texas, and you're in Atlanta, right?
I'm in Atlanta, yeah.
Yeah, I always think you're in Venice because that's where I met you.
Is that better?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay.
I miss the rich and steadying timbre of the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did, and now we have it.
Okay, good. Good.
Yeah.
Hey, Pia.
It's been a good voice. So that's apt. I've known about you, I met you, but your voice particularly in the BLM protests was really steadying and really helpful. And I think I have to say, one of the few voices that went beyond the sort of Twitter outrage, and that outrage is justified, but you actually, every day, it seems like, take some time to, reflect or help us through something. And God knows this nation needs it. We need it. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. I think what we, obviously, you're in the journalism business, so you're used to kind of exploring different truths and hearing different perspectives. And I just think that what tends to be missing with these huge news cycles is just people willing to do that for themselves. And I think we're in an age now with all the fake news where you kind of have to be your own journalist. And so I want to try to lead by example in that way.
Yeah.
And I'm very intentional about the things that I post because I know that a lot of people are going to be possibly sharing them and getting perspective from them, white, black, and everything else. So, you know, I want to be responsible about that and do my homework and also be authentic, you know, and just not be reactive to whatever the latest news item is, but to really figure out what all sides look like and what they're saying and where the truth lies in all. Because, you know, there's truth in all sides. There's no absolute truth in the sort of relative world, right? We talk about, you know, in wellness, like there being this sort of the metaphysical absolute truth of pure consciousness or that kind of stuff. But when you're talking about people, like we tend to think that we're the logical, rational ones, and everyone else is kind of being irrational and illogical, but that's not how it is at all. Everybody's being irrational. Everybody's under the influence of cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias. We're all looking for reasons to validate what we believe to be true. And so if we approach it with that, through that perspective and try to do the hard work of being as self-aware as possible, then I think we'll have something genuine to contribute to the conversation instead of just echoing what everybody else is already saying.
All right. Well, I guess we can hang up now because that's so good. That was amazing. Yeah, I mean, I'm going through that right now. We always, you know, one side is pointing fingers saying you're fascist to President Trump. The other side is pointing fingers saying, you know, you guys are anarchists or they call us fat. You know, what it's just in Buddhism, we say it's aggression creates aggression. And that doesn't meaning like the more righteous aggression you pour into the world, you think you're trying to damage the enemy or the evil, but you actually make the evil more inspired to fight back. And that doesn't mean that we can't be activists, and that doesn't mean that we should be passive, but it means there must be a other way than aggression. And I think what you have offered, and I've really appreciated it, you know, has been, I feel like I'm out in this chaotic, crazy world all day. And then I get to go home and you're like the cool uncle with like the cool cardigan. And you're like, let me tell you, kid, how to look at this from a point of view that isn't just of the day, but, you know, within history and within consciousness, like you said.
Yeah.
And I can digest and absorb a little bit and then go back out and actually offer something more than my confusion.
Yeah. No, and that's kind of I've kind of chosen that lane very intentionally, like to give you the 10,000 foot perspective instead of the on the ground, on the street perspective. And they're all valid. They're all relevant depending on what you need in that moment. But I feel like there aren't a lot of people who are giving that broader perspective, or who even can give the broader perspective, because you're in your human suit, which is, you know, has this particular skin color. So you kind of have to align with this group of people. And if you say something that's not in agreement with them, then you're going to ostracize yourself, or, you know, all these different, there's politics to all of these different ways that we talk about things. And I just always encourage everybody to challenge those assumptions and to be your own person, regardless of what your race is, to be your own person and to learn history for yourself. Because, you know, there's context to everything. It's all about context. And I want to acknowledge you for being the same way. Like that's what I appreciate about your voice, is I feel like you have the willingness to have these conversations in a way that would make people in your human suit skin color very uncomfortable. You know, and but I feel like you thrive in the growth that comes from being uncomfortable in that way. And it's not just with race. I also saw it with pandemic and all the different perspectives about, you know, how to get through this pandemic and just in general. I mean, that's what you've been doing. You made a whole career out of that, and I would even say it's a mission. It's a mission out of that, and because, you know, running something like Elephant Journal, we talked about this before. It's not for the faint at heart. And you really have to wake up every day like a marriage and just recommit to it every day. And I'm sure, you know, every night before you go to bed, you're thinking, I can't do this anymore. I want to do these other things. But it's that long-term commitment is no small thing. And the way you do anything is the way you do everything. So it's like you bring that energy to all of these conversations. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get on this call with you.
Well, thank you, and that's very generous. You may know I interviewed Jane Elliott, the anti-racist.
I saw that, yeah.
A few weeks ago, and it's at close to 200,000 views on YouTube. And I think like 50% of the comments are saying, "Who is this idiotic jerk white guy? He's super ignorant and uncomfortable, and he should just shut up." And my basic like reaction to that is, you're 100% correct.
Yeah.
I'm coming in, I'm asking her for help.
Yeah.
And I said in the green room with her, I said, be as hard on me, show people how uncomfortable it is to do that. Like, be ruthless, because I've seen her. I was prepared, but you know, you can't be prepared for Jane Elliott. You can't be prepared for anti-racism education. I just wrote about that yesterday. Like, there's this great quote, not by myself, that by someone much wiser, that says, if you're pretending that you're not racist, you can't begin your anti-racism education. It's something like that. Like, we all have ignorance. We all have confusion. We all have these preconceptions, prejudgments that we grew up with, and we have to acknowledge that and then just be willing to be uncomfortable. As one of my staff, my managing editor, Nicole, wrote about, and she's African American, and she wrote, "I want you guys to sit in the yuck. I want you to be uncomfortable." But I do have to say, listening to your videos, somehow you do two things at once. You enlighten, and it's been helpful, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like I'm a bad person when I listen to your videos. Like, it feels like I'm welcome. Like, that's kind of why I said cool uncle. Like, I'm in your living room and I'm learning. So I guess my question there is not just a compliment. My question is, how do you approach people who are well-intentioned, which I hope is all of the Elephant Journal audience? Wherever we're coming from, we want to learn. We want to be better. How do you approach people without frustration and judgment of your own?
You know, I put myself as much as I can into other people's shoes. And first of all, if you're following me or coming across my videos and whatnot, that means you're open to my perspective to some extent, right? So the last thing I want to do is turn you off. Now, I like to stir the pot and get people thinking about stuff, but I don't want to start off by invalidating your own experience. So that's usually my first sort of aim in my videos, is to validate your experience, whatever that is, and then to offer my perspective. And you know, I don't consider myself, and I've said this publicly, I don't consider myself to be an expert on anti-racism, right? I know what my little sliver of the Black experience has been, and so I just speak to that for the most part. And I know the conversations that I've had, so I'll just speak to those. But I'm not speaking for all Black people. And in fact, I'm still educating myself. Like, a lot of Black people, I would even say all Black people, are conditioned to the point where we don't even realize how racist some stuff is until we read Rachel Cargill's posts, and we're just like, oh my God, that is racist. I didn't even realize that. The way they said that was like, I'm getting informed as well. But there are different levels of being informed, and you know, most people who haven't been having the Black experience, you know, aren't educated beyond Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and maybe Frederick Douglass, and that's it. So it's like, why are we going to start with a PhD level education on racism? Because that's just going to intimidate people and make them feel like, oh, it's too much. So I'm like, let's start from where we are and let's take this journey together, not from a place where, I'm this authority, but it's, look, if you're genuinely interested in the experience of Black people, I'll be the gateway. I'll be your autobiography of a yogi to get you into meditation. And then you can kind of go in and explore whatever else you want to explore. But I just want to be as authentic and as truthful about my own experience, and hopefully that creates some sort of inquiry from the other person's that makes them want to learn more. And I think that's where you create the proper allies, when someone actually wants to learn more because you said something that inspired them, instead of shaming them to, because that just makes people want to go high and feel inadequate. And I don't think that's really helping anybody if we have people hiding and feeling inadequate and afraid to speak up. So I encourage people, hey, look, say whatever is on your mind. I'm not going to call you ignorant or call you whatever. We'll just try to we'll unpack this thing together. We'll figure it out. And that's just the lane I've chosen for myself. And that's because I know that there are other people who are more hardcore. And I think all of it is relevant. It's all kind of necessary. Some people like to be kind of beat up a little bit, I'm not that person. So you have to go to someone else's page to get that. But if you want the kind of, the gentle entry into this world, then yeah, come to my page and I'll sort you out.
So that's our homework for this weekend, everyone watching, and we're going to share this on IGTV and YouTube, etc. Is spend an hour, and it's, delightful is probably the wrong word, but it's genuinely an honor and a pleasure to get to watch your videos. Spend an hour, go through a bunch of videos, whatever the titles are that connect with you, and then pick a few where the titles don't connect with you, because that's like, what is the Christmas thing where you're turning over the little window? You don't know what you're going to get. And, it's been a real gift in this time, and a rare gift. And I do want to say, we've all had an experience in this nation with being anti-expert and saying, let's elect a guy who doesn't know anything and that'll be better. And we hate experts. So respect to Rachel Cargill and the experts out there and those voices that are powerful and make us uncomfortable. Jane Elliott, there's so many of them. But I also had the honor of talking with Senator Cory Booker and now yourself. And there are voices who, are more accessible and a little more friendly. And those voices can help us on a different wavelength where we're not just feeling, oh my God, it's important for us to feel responsibility and blame and deep remorse and heartbreak. And at the same time, it's important, as you said, to feel open and curious and delighted and like, oh, wow, there's a better world out there. And it's called understanding and not being a jerk, no judgment, and trying to, as you were saying, look through the walls or that we've grown up with systemic racism. All of us have grown up with these assumptions to varying extents. And we're on different sides of that systemic racism, obviously.
And it's systemic. It's not going to be changed overnight, It's going to require a lot of work, a lot of effort, and, people need to be in it for the long haul. We need to have a marathon approach, and that's not going to be sustainable if we're being sort of, shamed throughout the whole process. People are just going to get worn out and to say, I can't do this anymore. So, we need people on the sidelines, cheering you on and giving you water and, giving you granola bars and keeping you moving forward. Like, you can do this. We know you can do it.
Yeah. Whenever I get discouraged or whenever we get discouraged, I love to remind people, like, my mom in 1970 did not have the right to have her own P.O. box. Like, the feminist movement has been improving that quickly. Rights have been opening up. The colored signs the colored and white signs over, those were everywhere when my mom was a young woman. Ruby Bridges, who was painted by Norman Rockwell, entering the school, tomatoes and the N-word being thrown at her. She's not an old lady. She's alive and well today.
She's younger than my mom.
So, I mean,
she's 10 years older than me. She's only 10 years older than me.
So, I mean, it's discouraging to say, oh, we are not in an equitable world, that John Lewis wasn't able to die seeing his work completely realized. But at the same time, it is getting better, and we need to have that marathon approach and just stay focused, because, all the unborn children out there, we want them to have the chance to grow up in a world that isn't racist, or at least that is fully aware of its racism and is working toward equitable solutions.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you that's uncomfortable for me, but I want to do that because it's genuine, and I think a lot of white folks out here have that obstacle right now. I wanted to invite you on the show about a month ago, but I was seeing a lot of stuff, including from Rachel and others, saying, and I respected it and I listened, saying, don't ask your Black friends to explain racism to you. So I was sitting there like, what do I do? And I'm watching Jane Elliott videos one morning, and I'm like, oh, I'll invite her. That's perfect. A white lady can explain racism and anti-racism education to me. And I actually said that in the beginning of the video, and I got a lot of help for it, which is understandable. Like, I have Black friends. I said I didn't want to invite my Black friends to explain this stuff to me and to our community. I wanted to start because we're not supposed to. And I respect that, because our Black friends are sick to death. No, I mean, quite literally, of having explained this deadly, awful, aggressive racism to, privileged white folks. And, but you've been so willing to explain this to many of us, people of any color. So I guess that my question is, so I wasn't uncomfortable asking you, because I felt like I knew you and I like you and you're generous, but I did feel a real obstacle. Like, is this inappropriate to ask you to help explain anti-racism to us? How do you feel about all of that?
So it's a really good question. And, first of all, just to provide a little context to the reason why I do the videos that I do. So I had been doing those videos for months before I started. I wiped out my whole Instagram feed, and I said, I'm going to do a video a day. I'm going to talk about different insights and tell stories to help give people a broader perspective on life in general. And then when the George Floyd murder happened, which was very public, obviously, I did my first video where I openly talked about being racially profiled. That video ended up going viral. It got like over 3.5 million views, which was like, before that, my videos were getting maybe like 2,000, 3,000 views, maybe 5,000 on a good day, that kind of thing. So I thought, okay, well, that's a sign that people want to hear more about this topic. And so I started to talk about racism more openly. It's something I've never talked about publicly, right? I've talked about it my whole life with my circle of friends, with my family, because that's just what Black people do. We talk about Black, white, racism, our experiences and everything. But now it seemed like there was this opening that was hitting critical mass where people were actually thirsty to hear about this stuff. So I kept sharing more and more of my perspective and more of my experience. And so it was very organic, is what I'm saying. It was very organic. And there was a sense of inquiry that has never really happened before. And I think, if you have that genuine inquiry, right? Now, not to say this is the exact same thing, but if someone came to you and said, Waylon, can you tell me how do you write? How do you write an article for Elephant Journal, right? You're probably, unless this person is a beautiful woman or, somebody who's related to you, you're probably gonna just brush them off or just give them your canned answer or something like that. But if they came to you with a piece that they have written and they said, "Here, I would love to publish this on Elephant Journal." Now they have all your attention. You're like, "Okay, well, let's go through it." You want to make sure you don't bury the lead and blah, blah. You give them a lot more based on what they give to you. So
if I come to you prepared, I've studied.
Yeah, if you
Like, hey, what's this racism stuff?
yeah, and if I see you having conversations with all these people, Jay and Elliott and all these people, it's like, okay, this guy is really interested. So I'm more than happy to get on an Instagram live with you and talk to you. But I get hit up all the time by people saying, "Hey, can you come on my page and explain racism?" And I'll look at their page and it's like, they've done one post on George Floyd or something like that, and that's it. And it's like, I don't, you can go look at my videos and repost some of those if you want. So I think it's still, the supply and demand still applies to these conversations where you want to get in dialogue with people who have a wide reach, because this one conversation can reach hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, and give them tools and ways of looking at these things. And that's I think very useful. That's a very useful way for both of us to spend our time here, because you could be talking to anybody right now. You could be probably talking to Rachel Cargill and having that conversation. So yeah, I just I again, whether I'm talking about racism, whether I'm talking about meditation, if I'm talking about how to change a tire, I'm not going to make anybody feel bad for asking any question that they have if they've demonstrated a level of inquiry and a level of preparation that makes me realize they value this conversation and this exchange.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that makes 100% sense. In the Buddhist tradition that I was blessed to grow up in, you would never go to a teacher and just be like, kind of take them for granted. You would go with respect, you would go with preparation, you would go fully respecting them, saying no if they said no. There's a tradition of asking 3 times before you get to a yes, if you ask a teacher to explain something to you. So yeah, there needs to be respect.
Yeah, and if they give you homework, you have to do that homework first. If they say, go meditate for a month and come back and ask me the same question, you may find you don't even have the question anymore because the answer was in the homework. So that's why I tell a lot of people, before you start to go and have these conversations, start with watching that documentary 13th, because that'll be a great primer on the general state of how things got to be the way they are. And then you can use that as your gateway to go and explore all these other things based on your own personal interest.
Yeah, a couple other, amen. And a couple other recommendations would be, it's only one chapter and it happened actually all over the US, but I spent, what was that TV show? It was depicted in the TV show and then people started learning about it, the Tulsa riot.
Yeah.
Whatever it was.
The Black Wall Street thing.
Yeah, and then if you go on YouTube, there's amazing pieces by PBS, etc. And watching that, you get a real specific window into literally this Black community, Blacks all over the U.S. settled in Tulsa and other places and tried to create their own town with their own security because they were just trying to have a safe life without racism. And then, the white man looked at what they had accomplished and said, this isn't right, and went in and raped and pillaged and looted and destroyed the whole thing. Even, I think someone said it was the first instance of airplane warfare in the U.S. It was American on American. Before Pearl Harbor and all that, they literally flew planes and dropped bombs on the Black community there. And that was a powerful morning for me during all this. And, with John Lewis's passing recently, cable actually did a good thing. They offered all this John Lewis coverage, and you can watch a lot on him and his life and times, which encompass a lot of the civil rights movement, or all of this.
Yeah, man. There's so many stories. Again, that's just like one or two out of there's as many Black stories like that as there are white stories. So, and I think the great thing about being in a media age, and we're all basically storytellers, you know, with our phones, we're going to see a lot more of these stories, and not just the tragedies, but also the amazing things that have happened in Black communities and with Black people in general, and artists and educators, and hopefully the combination of that with our education around racism. And I say our intentionally because I think we're all being more and more educated. Black people are being more educated about how ignorant white people are, and white people are being more educated about how ignorant they are. And so we all kind of have to find a middle ground where we can support one another throughout this process. And, you know, that reparations conversation needs to be had. You know, it may not necessarily be a monetary thing, but it's got to be some way of finding balance to help level the field a little bit. If we're serious about taking anti-racist measures, you know, that's got to be a part of the conversation too. So, yeah, I think this is a great time to be alive.
Well said. Yeah. May you live in interesting times was the ancient Chinese curse, I believe. So I think less of a curse than sort of a wink. And yeah, in terms of reparations, it's great to see that issue come up. And there was an article in the New York Times a few years ago about a very specific part of our housing policy in the U.S. over time, where we systematically took any Black wealth that existed in the housing market and transferred it over to white folks. And when you read that article, just that one article, you're like, okay, this isn't just some sort of inequality isn't just a result of leftover results from slavery, 140 years ago. It's been happening ever since. Systematic racism is a real thing, like as solid as the people. And you read that one story, and you're like, okay, reparations. Where do I sign? You know, we're giving half of our taxes right to the military every tax season. Why don't we allocate some to fix? I mean, you want to talk about infrastructure? Our societal infrastructure is just completely twisted. I mean, you're a yoga teacher. It's like we're completely messed up. We have to fix that.
Well, and the worst thing is people just see it as, oh, that's just the way things are. You know, that's just normal. And fixing it is like abnormal, which actually it's abnormal the way it is right now. And fixing it makes like it normal. Fine. Yeah.
We're good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's the hard work, is fixing it. Just like being new to yoga, if you have some kind of scoliosis or some kind of condition, yoga's going to be really, really challenging for you, and you're going to want to quit. You're not going to want to do it, but every time you show up, it's going to get a little bit better. And then afterwards, you know, there's going to be all kinds of pushback on this whole reparations thing. But I think if we can flash forward 100 years to those generations, they're going to be so thankful that we did that hard work and had those conversations today, because you're going to have so much more beauty in society when you have people feeling seen and heard and understood, which is what the reparations conversation really is about. It's like, hey, we see your pain, we understand, and this is how we want to try to reconcile. We can't make up for it, but this is how we want to try to reconcile and even this playing field for you guys.
Yeah, exactly. I want to be super clear. When I'm doing this, I'm talking about society, white society, Black society.
Yeah, but we're all twisted, man. We're all twisted. People always want to talk about Black on Black crime. You know, why don't we talk more about Black people killing Black people? Why are we only focusing on police killing Black people? Well, let's pull the lens back a little bit, right? Why are Black people killing Black people? What resources are they lacking that pushes them to the point of wanting to murder somebody who looks like them? What kind of systemic structures are in place that creates the dynamic of poverty, which then leads to crime, right? So again, if you look at the housing system and you look at the welfare systems and the subsidy systems and all these other systems that have played to the advantage of white communities and the disadvantage of Black communities, it's the Black on Black crime is a symptom of systemic racism. That's what it is. So if you're not taking your trash out of your house and you start to get rats in your kitchen, it's not, you don't have a rat problem, you have a trash problem. You need to get rid of the trash. You get rid of the trash, the rats will go away.
Yeah.
Right? We need to deal with the system.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally the point AOC was making when she got accosted on the steps of the Capitol.
Yeah.
She was just saying there is a relationship between poverty and crime. And if we're more equitable, you know, both can be eased together. And yeah, that congressman, a real piece of work, Congressman Yoho, went on the House floor and instead of apologizing, cried because he had been on food stamps with his wife when he was young and blah, blah. And he's voted time after time to get rid of food stamps, even though he had the nerve to cry on the House floor because he had been in rough shape and he had to be on food stamps. You're like, wow, you just listen to yourself and you'll learn.
And those are just the conversations that are happening in public, you know? It's like if you see, I used to live in this house in Washington, D.C. in college, and you would see rats outside during the day. So you know, if you see rats during the day, you have a major infestation on your hands because they don't usually come out during the day, right? And so they brought a rat patrol guy in, and it was insane. They had tunnels. The whole neighborhood was infested with rats. So the fact that we're capturing this stuff on camera, you know, police brutality. I mean, God knows how much brutality happens off camera, and how many of these conversations, these you know, I'm not going to say racist politicians, but bigoted politicians are having in those back rooms with each other and just with themselves and with their friend circles. And, you know, so this is a major problem. There is definitely a pandemic of racism that's occurring. And I just look at all these as the symptoms. You know, he's not really the problem. He's a symptom of a system that makes him think it's okay to say those things publicly to someone to their face who's a colleague of theirs in one of the highest offices of the land. I mean, that's incredible.
Incredible.
That the system is so strong that people feel like they have that level of permission.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, Mary Trump is doing the rounds promoting her book, and she was asked if she had ever heard Donald say the N-word or insult, you know, Jews, and she was like, yeah. She was like, of course. It wasn't even like a, yes, big news. And I don't even think that made news in the US. It's just so taken for granted now. Talk about systemic racism, that we have a racist president. Maybe he operates generally through dog whistles rather than just coming out and saying it, but his policies certainly reflect it.
And that's also nothing new. Like all the presidents have said stuff like that for the most part. You know, they have tapes of Lyndon Johnson saying the N-word, and you know, they've all said that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, at least, you know, most of the presidents were hopefully actively working against their own victory. Like when Lyndon Johnson also got on the House floor and said, you know, we shall overcome, when he enacted the Civil Rights Act. You know, and he was a good old boy, Southern boy. I mean, you can only imagine how he was raised.
Yeah, I mean, they were all pressured. Nobody concedes anything unless they're experiencing some level of pressure from their constituents.
Yeah, there's been a lot of like controversy about Confederate monuments and all this, and you know, and Trump has been incredibly defensive about it generally, but also particularly when criticism arises around Washington or Jefferson, who owned slaves. And I went to Monticello, Jefferson's famous home, and I recommend everyone does, because that museum, that home is doing it right. They have an entire exhibit on the slaves as individuals, not just as slaves. They talk about it incredibly openly, and you leave that place learning. And I think, you know, just to touch on the monument thing, that's what I would love to see, is that we don't forget. We shouldn't throw the statues in the river. We should throw them into a museum. They certainly shouldn't be out in the open, but they should be in a museum where we don't forget and where there's plaques and where we learn about, oh my God, Jefferson, amazing guy, inventor, one of the founders of the US, amazing mind, and a slave owner and a racist and a rapist. And, you know, it's good to see the full measure of a man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that'll help us grow.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I saw this wonderful meme, you probably saw it too, said, look, if someone kidnapped your child and raped them and you never saw them again, where would you want us to put the statue of that person? You know, it's like, I think a museum is probably better than on a pedestal in the middle of the town square of whatever city you're in. So,
yeah, my aunt lives in Richmond, and you know, you would go up and down that street, whatever that street is. I'd only been there like 3 or 4 times in the Fan, or I think, and seeing all these Confederate monuments, even 5 years ago or 10 years ago when I was first there, you're like, wow, this is weird. And they have a statue of Arthur Ashe as well, which is super cool. But you're like, wow, this is a real disconnect. So I'm glad that's kind of come to a painful point, and we're
But, you know, look, I'm just to play devil's advocate too. We have to be careful of seeing people and times out of context, right? Like, I'm not in favor of having any slave owner statues publicly displayed, but I've heard people talk a lot about, and you probably heard this too, about Gandhi and about his misogyny and or supposed alleged misogyny and all of that. Let's take down the Gandhi statues, you know. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, there was a caste system happening while Gandhi was alive in the 20s and 30s and 40s, but you can't discount his life's work of liberating 1 billion people from British colonialism. I mean, that's remarkable, you know. And he was very open about his own struggles with truth and reconciling his idea, the cultural ideas of the caste system in India and all of these things. So I just, you know, I don't think anything is necessarily black or white based on how we view things today. And I just want to caution people who have this idea that we should just take them all down. It's like with Me Too, you know, it's like every guy was afraid to say anything because you didn't want some woman from your past who may have saw things differently than you to come out and say something about you, and then, you know, you have to deal with that. And I put myself in that situation. Like, I consider myself to be a very good person, a good guy, but have I always made the highest choice when it comes to dating and relationships? Not really. I mean, I was young, I grew up, I was, you know, intoxicated sometimes and said stuff or did stuff that I'm not proud of today as a 40-something-year-old man. So I would hate to be torn down and not be able to make videos on racism because I've been ostracized based on something that happened when I was 18 years old, you know, under the influence of alcohol, and I didn't say the right thing. So I think context is always important, and it's nothing is ever really black or white when it comes to the subject of monuments and statues and whatnot. We're going to take down the Washington Monument because George Washington owned slaves. I mean, you know, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I think that's where you get into that sort of Twitter mind, you know, the Twitter sort of self-righteous hive mind. I love that you raised Gandhi. I mean, you know, leading proponent in the real world, not just theoretically, of nonviolence in history. And yet he did some things that are reprehensible. There's some stuff I don't think you know about that he did that I've written about that, you know, if people search on Elephant and find that blog, they will be like, oh my God, we're definitely taking down any statues of Gandhi. But at the same time, amazing human being, and what a contribution. And I think there's a name for that. You know, if you can keep two opposing truths.
It's called humanity. We're all like that. I'm sure if somebody did a documentary on me, I said this during the Tiger King. If somebody came and followed me 24 hours a day with a camera, you could paint me to be the weirdest person you've ever seen in your entire life, you know? And if you had full editing control over what you showed and what you omitted from my story, people would be thinking I was this nutcase, you know, because
Sure. But
that's
that, I
what
mean,
media does.
but what that's what you're saying. What you're saying there points to the need for journalism and for truth. And that's why I love PBS or BBC. Like, look for sources that are showing a Jefferson or a Washington or a Lincoln or a Gandhi or a Light or a Tiger King in the full truth. And the Tiger King documentary was not a documentary; it was entertainment,
Right. It was
and
entertainment. It was
they told
entertainment.
a very specific story. And when people say, the media is full, I'm like, the media is sort of like saying food is bad.
Yeah.
You can't say food is bad. There's some good media, there's bad media, there's journalism. So please, everyone out there, subscribe not only to Light Watkins, Elephant Journal, hopefully, but to journalism and really, ignore that conspiracy craziness on the right and left. Dr. Fauci right now is getting death threats. His
And these
wife and
bodyguards, I heard.
his daughter are getting death threats. It's not okay. It's not okay. That guy has served Republicans and Democrats from the point of view of science and public education. Has he made mistakes? Yes. Is science imperfect? That's literally what science is. He's trying to figure it out. Excuse my friend.
And by the way, I'm not anti like revealing the shadow side. I think you should talk about everything, but also see everything in context. Like, don't someone's worst day isn't all they are. We also have to put into context their best day. It's like I send out these daily emails. They're called daily doses of inspiration, and most of them are really great. Some of them maybe not so much. And every now and again, just like you were saying before in our conversation, like if you say something, if Elephant Journal says something about Trump, you get a lot of pushback, right? But that's just one article. That's not all you are. You can't discount the millions of articles that you guys have published for one Trump article.
Right.
It's like you have to put it into context. Okay, they had a day where they decided to focus on this, but they are more than just any one article at this point. And as a spiritually mature person, I think we want to have that perspective when we're hearing news about someone or trying to figure out what our take on a situation is that it's got to be more than just this one thing. Like, let's see what else has happened in context around this, and that's how we can formulate an opinion that's going to be sustainable, that's going to be able to deal with the criticism that we're going to get from all sides, and that's what I try to bring to my videos.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Over here at University of Colorado, just like a couple hundred yards that way, there's a big old library that says he, and it should say he, she, they, he who forgets history remains forever a child. So I think that's the role of museums, just to kind of wrap this up in a bow, if we're generally agreed, is to acknowledge the good and the bad, to tell the story so that we can see the full measure of a human being. Giuliana has a great comment here. The difference is that people refuse to see these historical figures as both. Instead of taking statues down, change what the plaques say and explain why those people should not be blindly admired. I think that applies to people like Gandhi, Jefferson, Washington. I think it is appropriate to take down statues of, if the measure of a man is violence and racism, that needs to go into a museum. That should not be in the public square. As another meme pointed out, you don't go to Germany and see statues of Hitler with plaques explaining his role in history.
Right.
You go to a museum, you go to a Holocaust museum for that,
Yeah.
Good talk.
Yeah.
And I think, you also pointed to the sort of social media culture where you're saying, people unsubscribe or unfollow you based on one post or one article. Yesterday, there's a Boulder group on Facebook for all of Boulder, Colorado, where I live. And they were all like bashing our city council for messing up this very important ballot measure law that's going forward to allow more occupancy in bedrooms. Boulder is getting yuppieized by the tech community and it's no longer affordable. So there's a movement to make Boulder more affordable, and that's super urgent and important. The city council is getting bashed on Facebook, and they messed it up, but and I won't tell the whole story because it's not relevant, but the city attorney is the one who actually messed it up. So there's like 25 comments, and I love what you said before about how at the end of the day I feel kind of like, why do I do this? So I see 25 comments bashing some good people for messing up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, here I go. So I just go in and I say, well, I'm not on their side. They messed up. But the actual situation is this, and we should hold these people accountable. And actually what's happening is all the people in this comment thread are using this F up to bash one side. They're playing politics.
Yeah.
And both sides are responsible for messing this up. And developers are not building the affordable housing they want. They're just using you. Anyway, and then of course, like 2 hours later, I have an exercise. You know, my girlfriend is like patiently waiting for me to come hang out. We haven't had dinner. 2 hours later, I've been bashed in the face by a mob. I'm convinced I'm like anti-affordable housing. And you're like, you know, I grew up dirt poor here in Boulder. My mom wouldn't be able to live here in New Boulder. This is something I cared about before you were even here.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to let this culture of hate mobbing on social media go forward. It's not healthy for our discourse, and it's not true. So I think, you know, to urge everyone here to speak up.
Yeah.
Like you were saying about the Me Too movement, everyone has to be able to speak up and be honest and contribute to the conversation, not just get silent and kind of wait for BLM or Me Too to pass.
Yeah.
And for that, the whole culture has to actually get more honest. And I think, again, journalism is important to that.
Yeah, and it's everyone has responsibility, even if you are the, you know, the perceived victim of whatever atrocity took place. Like if you want people to speak up, you have to create a space for that to happen.
Right.
You know, so people aren't going to just jump into a mob and try to calm things down if they don't feel like they're going to get any support in that way. And, you know, that's the work that we're agreeing to collectively do as a society. I just try to remind myself, man, the people who are yelling the loudest are usually the ones who aren't doing any work. People who are doing the work don't have time to be on, you know, all these people's pages and leaving all these negative comments and whatnot. And so that's just one way I sort of reconcile that for myself and try not to get pulled into the fire, because then it's taken away from me being able to generate more content by getting lost in a thread of people who are really not interested in contributing to the solution other than just being instigators.
Let me close this window. Someone's mowing. It's the sound of summer. Well, thank you. Like, I think, you know, going forward, how do you see? I think there's a lot of fear that the BLM moment will be a moment, not a movement, for all Americans.
Yes.
That it is and already has retreated to be the concern, again, mostly of Black Americans, African Americans, and progressives, but it needs to be a concern of all of us. How do you see us making the most progress in this marathon, as you referred to it?
Well, I think taking having a naive vision that this can change, along with a realistic idea of how long it's going to take to change. I think the combination of those two things, you know, realistically, people are going to go back to whatever they consider to be normal at some point. Idealistically, we have to keep in our hearts that things can change, we can do better, and I think we don't need everybody, but we need a few people on all sides to be bold enough to keep the conversation going. So people like you, people like me, we need to be the ones who aren't as concerned about fitting in, because those are really the only ones who've ever been the real change agents, are the people who are not concerned about fitting in, enough to be able to speak up and to speak authentically and to speak out whenever we see injustices happening around us. So I think if we have the 1% of people willing to do that on all sides, it can't just be black people, you know, it's got to be white people as well. Then I think we're gonna move that needle maybe a little bit before it's all said and done.
Well said. Yeah, I mean, I'm proud. It's not the right word, but I'm proud to say that equal rights for all has been one of our 12 areas of focus since we started in 2002, and we've done interviews and articles about racism and sexism and anti-Semitism ever since, and we'll continue to do so. And I've always, among friends, I've always insulted some of our competitors, and I don't view any other websites really as competitors. There's plenty of space for all, but I call them the smoothie sites. Like, we're not all about smoothie recipes, and if we are, it better be organic.
The Jamba Juice, those are the Jamba Juice sites compared to your organic avenue.
Yeah, our messy organic hippie juice bar. So yeah, let's keep it up. And us is you guys. Us is Light. Us is everyone who dares to write something genuine instead of being silent and going about their day. So please write with Elephant. Please follow Light. Like I said, your assignment for the weekend, if you choose to accept it, is spend a delicious and delightful hour
binge watching my videos.
I've done it a couple times, and honestly, it's been a respite in the desert. It's been like being at an oasis where I'm not taking a vacation. I'm still learning, but I'm there's I don't know. You're just a friendly, solid guy. So thank you.
Thank you, man. Thank you for all that you do and all you contribute to the conversation. Really pleasure talking to you.
We'll keep challenging all of us and keep up the great work. I know you have no other choice.
Thank you.
All right. Light Watkins, everybody, go follow him and watch his videos. Thank you.
Thanks, brother.